Hello everybody, Revimegas here, welcoming you to a small review of Edge of Eternity. Yes, this game is an interesting RPG developed by Midgar Studio. Now I haven't played through the entire game, we're just going to go through the initial intro as well as some of the later portions of the game, and give my little brief review on how I felt about playing it and if the game is something that will interest you. So this game does a great job initially of setting up a interesting dynamic between the different characters that you will initially play as. You play as basically a team of 4 with Heryon is the main character. And you're introduced to a few different characters that are part of this dynamic group of individuals that kind of fulfill a military role. You have a lot of banter between them initially in this intro, as well as getting the sense that they are friends. And I really did enjoy that aspect of it. I felt like this is a realistic team of people. There's infighting, there's a little bit of joking, and overall it was pretty interesting and set up a decent dynamic between the team. Now, right after you get done with this scene, all that is thrown out the window. Now, brief spoilers, which honestly won't go further than the tutorial. All these people will die.
Man, that's rough. I'm sorry I...
Shut up.
It's such an odd aspect because you're introduced to these people. You get the feeling that you do want them to be, people that will be in your party. And they're killed off very quickly. After the first 5 minutes, it's like they get picked off like flies. The first guy gets crushed by boulders. You fight an enemy and she immediately gets killed by a spike to the chest. And you're like, alright, I'm guessing most of these people are going to disappear then. And you notice that their weapon selections are duplicated. The two characters use a sword and shield. And that definitely made me go, well, maybe one will survive, but more than likely... They're not. And yeah, that is definitely the aspect that goes on. They each kind of race to see who will die first after the initial 2 die. And it's kind of funny because the first guy, it's like all of a sudden he's like, I'm corrupted. I have this horrible disease that turns me into an enemy. It's like, all right. So you end up having to kill him. It's very sad, very traumatizing for the team. And I was like, all right. Then obviously the girl passes away and you're left with your main character who, lives. And it was an okay intro from the team dynamic point. Now, here is where you're going to really lose any interest in this game. The character that you have to basically take throughout this dungeon or environment to get to the next point, I should say, is the most annoying character ever designed. And it's unfortunate because you meet him within the first 30 minutes of the game. Now, if an intro is supposed to get you excited for the rest of the game, this hurt me so much. This guy was the most annoying character to ever have in the game. It was a constant complaint fest, and he had this whiny, nasally voice.
It's that thing again! It's coming for me! It's going to kill me! Protect me!
So, you're basically leading him through the dungeon, and at every time somebody does pass away on your team, he makes like an annoying retort, basically tells you you're weak, while also whining and crying behind you. It is a horrible part of the game, and to be honest, this almost made me put the game down. I didn't want to play it. I was so annoyed by this character. It was completely awful. But I trudged through it, and you're kind of left with this very unsatisfactory tutorial feeling. It sets up a decent amount of intrigue, but there's no real sense of what is going on. The game is very odd. in the sense that once you get past this tutorial, it feels like you're playing a completely different game. It doesn't even feel like you're playing the same game that you were playing in the intro, which is really odd. And there's a couple of things you'll notice like immediately. First of all, once you get to the second part, the very first town after the intro scene, there will be cutouts for your characters talking. This isn't present in the intro tutorial scene, and it almost feels like either one was done first and the other one was done later, or they just decided not to introduce that in. But it's a really weird concept because it's so apparent. You have these conversations going on back and forward, and they're using in the intro very dynamic, like people talking to each other. It's cameras focused on them, and then once you get out of that, it doesn't really focus on your characters at all. It's always this talking through these boxes with these cutouts. It's really odd. And once again, it kind of feels the gravitas of like the story going on. You play at the beginning and you have this huge technological world. There's starships, there's giant towers, there's enemies firing cannons, there's mechs. And then once you get past that part, you're almost back into an old school RPG world, that very fantasy element. It's such a weird, it's a weird take. It feels weird, it feels jarring. And it's just really out of place. It does feel like two games mashed together. Now, once you get past that initial intro scene, you're also brought into this world that feels very barren. It's an odd concept because of the fact they immediately tell you, hey, there's going to be a night-day scale style of people moving around, and you should be, expecting to not find a quest giver at a certain time, but maybe later. Maybe there will be more quests at night versus day. Maybe you won't be able to find certain people. Maybe certain services won't be available. That's all well and good, but the world feels very static and lifeless. And what I mean by that is you take games like, even old school games like Final Fantasy IX, where people are moving in the background, they're moving around, they're walking through the town, and maybe they aren't interactable, and that is the case with this. They are not interactable people that you talk to, some just won't talk to you. But a game like Final Fantasy IX, even back in the day, had that characters would be walking around and there would be maybe pop-ups of dialogue and such. And it made the world feel like there was actually people living in it, that it wasn't just a barren, everybody stood in one spot and that was it. And that's how this game does feel in the towns. Now, the other aspect of this is the world itself, the outside world that you can walk around, you can play in, you can do all kinds of fighting in, there's quests, that kind of stuff as well. And this world is very barren, it feels like. It's hard to actually see where enemies are because, at least in the portions I played and have seen and everything like that, it is very overgrown. So you will run into that as well. It's a little bit hard to feel like you're actually in a living, breathing world when you don't see as much running around as you feel there should be, like in an MMO or in a game like a Tales series. Now, once you do get into combat, the combat's not bad. It is a ATB style, I believe that's what it's called, where basically a bar will fill up. Once the bar fills up, you get to take an action. Enemies have their own bar. It's, I believe, based on speed. And basically, it's how many actions you get to take. It's when you get to take your action. You can always see who's coming up on their actions, that kind of stuff. And it's a decent dynamic. It is turn-based in that style. There is no running around. There is no basically free movement. It's based on your turn. And you can do things during your turn like move, you can attack, you can use spells, you can do a lot of different actions. And the other issue not issue, but caveat with this is you can move in a hexagonal grid. When you look at the move action, which is one of the actions, it brings up a bunch of hexagons, and you can actually move to those. This is used to dodge certain attacks in the game, and it's an interesting system. It also does affect if you can be attacked, like if they're within a grid, a space, and you are a swordsman, you'll be able to attack them, but if they move 2 or 3 away, you're not going to be. It's basically an old school kind of grid-based system with some caveats to it. It's an interesting dynamic, and I actually did like the combat system with that. I did feel like I was actually playing a different take on a traditional RPG, which was kind of nice. It was a definite difference from a game like Tales, but I enjoyed it a lot with the combat system. The last thing I will bring up, and the final caveats I will kind of talk about, is the story as well as some of my issues that I've had with it and some of the good things that I've had with it. Now, story-wise, I'm not far enough into it to know which direction this story is going. The tutorial and the first few missions kind of throw a lot at you, especially the tutorial. You're introduced to this, other race. Then you're told about different gods within the tutorial. You're under the understanding that there's this virus that's killing everybody off called the Corrosion, and you're left with a lot of different unanswered questions. It's not a bad intro. It definitely, the story has a lot of uniqueness in that sense to it, and I did enjoy that. They have this very big overarching scale of, hey, the Corrosion's destroying people, killing them, and everyone's kind of afraid of this alien race as well. And then they bring in more of a personal to your character, that the reason he's doing anything is for his mother. It's a nice little take. It definitely did make me feel like the game was a little bit more realistic. Now, this game is, I do enjoy this game. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy this game at all. I do think it's a really well done and fun game from a small team. And that is the biggest thing I want to bring up. This is a small team making this game. So you will see things that are buggy. You will have enemies that might get stuck in a wall. You might have clothing clipping. You'll notice that there might not be as much of a refined polish on everything as there should be. And that will be the case. And that should not completely turn you away from this game. It has a lot of spirit, is a good way to put it. It has a lot of charm. Just that charm is rough. It's a very rough charm to it. But it has a lot of solid backing. The team is still trying to fix up some of the issues, clean it up. They're still patching a lot of these stuff into it, adding new systems such as the crystal merging. There is a lot of different, aspects that are being put into it. And it's definitely a fun game if you're looking for something to scratch that JRPG itch on Steam. So if this is one of those games that you are curious about, I would definitely say give it a try. It is cheaper than some of the bigger name RPGs out there at $30. And it is a lot of fun. But once again, this has been Edge of Eternity. Definitely give it a look. And until next time, this is Rev Mega saying I'll catch you later.